June 27th, 1951.
Everything to follow is based upon a happening that occurred on June 27th, 1951. Just an ordinary day. Perhaps it means nothing to you, perhaps. Unless, of course, your name is George Rosen. If you are George Rosen, you may remember that June 27th was a Wednesday. To you, Wednesday means just one thing. Another one locked up. Another variety off the press. You've seen a lot of editions roll off now. A radio editor of Variety, you know this business inside out. There are special stories you remember. Some of those priceless Variety heads that stick in your mind. Some of the stuff out of your own typewriter that still looks good when you read it back years later. Your name is George Rosen, and you remember each of the Variety editions with a pride of personal creation. But do you remember the issue that came out on June 27th, 1951? What happened on that day, Mr. Rosen? Were you feeling good that morning? Was that the day you got the raise? Do you remember the edition that came off the press that day, Mr. Rosen? Variety, June 27th, 1951, page 39, radio section. A double truck ad headlined, "Please, not buried alive." The advertiser, radio station WSM, Nashville, Tennessee. The copy? This is what it said.
Shall this be written on the tombstone? Radio, 1920, 1951. The operation was a success, but the patient died. Perhaps. Yet the curious fact apparent at this writing is that the patient is not dead at all. Virile in its youth, grown wiser in its maturity, the 31-year-old giant is being buried alive. Those of us who have watched the industry through the years have seen the infant mature until today, radio's Herculean in its power alike to serve the public interest and to move mountains of American-built products. How odd, then, that there are those today who are frenzied as flies in a mirrored box in their zeal to bury radio while it yet lives. How odd that a mass hysteria reminiscent of bank runs of the 30s should grip advertising people, a caste which has, until now, believed itself insulated against such emotional contagion. The trade press headlines, "Radios fight for survival. Great networks slice radio rates. Rumor flies that radio is doomed." The infection, until these last months shielded from the public by the skin and flesh of sober judgment, has broken through. A blood-red rash across the face of the industry in New York and other major advertising centers. And we who must view from afar are startled by the witch hunt atmosphere of those who would track down a great industry and cast it in the grave that its last breath might be smothered by the very ones who fathered it. Little wonder that the competition stands by, slyly smiling, and now and then kicking a shoe full of dirt graveward. Perhaps one quiet voice can do little to halt the surge of emotional thoughtlessness. Even so, we would speak out. Even so, we would call attention to the facts.
That's what we said, Mr. Rosen. The facts. The kind of facts that with careful premeditation pushed our neck straight out. You see, the rest of this ad told the story of WSM radio as we knew it then. In 1951, radio at WSM was a big sound.
WSM radio in 1951 was the sound of our full staff band.
Yes, WSM radio was a big sound.
It was the sound of the biggest studio audience in the world. 5,000 people cheering our Saturday night Grand Ole Opry program.
It was the sound of our writers turning out more live originations than were produced by any single station in America.
Hey, has anybody seen Roy Acuff?
It was the sound of our WSM halls full of talent.
From the studios of WSM in Nashville, Tennessee, the National Broadcasting Company brings you Especially for You.
Here is music in the night. Most of it soft, all of it designed especially for you. Won't you listen?
Yes, Mr. Rosen, radio at WSM was a big sound in 1951. You remember that summer, radio folks doing window jump outs? Figuratively, that is. Everybody talking about cutting budgets, reducing rates, firing talent. And that was the reason for our ad in Variety. That was the reason we ran our neck way out to there. Let's go back to that ad that keynoted our WSM stand. This is a direct quote.
At WSM, and we venture to say at other large stations throughout America, there is no wild retreat. There is no slashing of rates unaffected by network operations. There are no convulsive midnight conferences. At WSM, there is business as usual, and as usual, business is good. Business, in fact, has never been so good as it is right now in 1951. Station income is up. We have more people on our payroll than ever before. Advertisers on WSM still clamor for certain programs. And one show has a waiting list of 4 sponsors standing in line to take the program in case it should become available. Each week, we originate 17 network shows from our Nashville studios. Each week, people come from all over America to see our shows produced. In fact, more than 300,000 people will see WSM live originations as they go on the air this year. Talent cutback? Not at WSM, where we have more than 200 big-name entertainers on our payroll. Radio dying? Not at this station, where national magazines send writers down year after year to do the WSM story. But the point we would like to make is that the WSM kind of radio is alive and growing as never before in our 25 years. It is true that WSM is one of America's big stations, operating with the power of a 50,000-watt clear-channel voice to a vast area. Still, we are but a part of a great industry. We would not speak for the other broadcasters. We speak only for WSM. We say only this: radio at WSM is here to stay because of the simple and obvious fact that never before has it sold so much merchandise or served so many people.
There was more copy in the ad. We won't read it all, but you get the idea. We were saying that our kind of radio would continue to live because we would continue to channel into it precisely the same kind of creative and financial effort that has made WSM one of the country's big stations.
You may remember what some folks said about us, Mr. Rosen. They said, in effect, that's great. The ad contains real nice words, but words are easy. Just wait until the going gets really tough and see what the WSM boys will do. They'll cut rates, they'll fire talent, they'll ease the breakdown on all that fine public service stuff. Just wait, they said, until it dawns on WSM that radio is no longer a big sound.
That's the way things stood in 1951, Mr. Rosen. Now, we won't kid you. We won't say that we were 100% self-confident, that at no time did we doubt our ability to accomplish our advertised goal. But of one thing we were sure, very sure. We would look only to the future. We would think only in terms of expansion of WSM and its ability to serve this vast southern area.
This, Mr. Rosen, is our bid for a Variety Award. What we say from this moment forward is a report on what happened since our statement of future policy appeared in Variety as a full-page ad in Fortune magazine and in other leading advertising publications. If, in your judgment, we backed up our words with appropriate action, perhaps we're in line for a Variety Award. It's for you to judge. We will concern ourselves only with the presentation in capsule form of the pertinent facts.
On a day like today, we pass the time away, writing love letters in the sand. How you laugh.
Now, Mr. Rosen, there are facts, and there are figures and figures, which brings us squarely up against a very nice one, Dolores Watson. But this isn't, you should pardon the vulgar expression, television, so we'll content ourselves with a sound. And a very nice sound it is, too. Dolores on her NBC program, Tin Pan Valley.
Meant nothing to you. Now my poor heart just aches with every wave it breaks over love letters in the sand.
That's just a sample, Mr. Rosen. A very small sample of the type of thing lots of folks said we wouldn't be doing by 1953. When we ran our statement in Variety, we pointed to the fact that we were then doing 17 network feeds per week. In the face of the dire predictions about the future of radio, we were foolish enough to hazard the guess that we could continue to operate the kind of radio station which would do as many as 17 network feeds per week, a total of 884 during a single year. Now, Mr. Rosen, if you'll take a short walk with us over to the man who punches the adding machine keys, we'll check on what has happened 2 years later. Got those figures yet, Joe?
Just a minute. You wanted all the network shows, didn't you? All our feeds, CBS, Mutual, NBC, the whole ball of wax?
Right.
Well, just a minute. Let me get these totals here together. Swift, Jules Shortening, Martha White shows, Jefferson Island programs, Cedar Crest shows, Sunday Down South. Let's see, here we are, 904.
There you are, Mr. Rosen. The goal, 884. The total for 1953, 904.
That's a somewhat impressive quantity. But you say, what about the quality? Same fine stars you had in 1951?
Some people might think our answer to that would be yes, but you wouldn't. You know this business too well. Public tastes change. Talent comes and goes.
In the past, we've sent folks like Dinah Shore, Phil Harris, Kay Arvin, Kitty Callan, James Melton to the big time. A year and a half ago, it was a lad we did a lot of talking about the last time we made a pitch for a Variety Award, Snooky Lanson. The Lucky Strike Hit Parade needed a singer, and they liked our boy Lanson.
Maybe you think that left a big fat hole in our Sunday Down South network program. And you think right. Snooky had been the mainstay of that half-hour production for 6 years. But we had said business as usual at WSM. And at this station, that means the discovery and development of talent.
Hey, yonder comes a cotton picker walking down the road, puffing like a locomotive carrying a load. Hey, hey, Mr. Cotton Picker, what you gonna do? Gonna get gone away from you. Here is Mr. Cotton Picker passing by my shack. Seems as if his back is breaking with a cotton sack. Hey, hey, Mr. Cotton Picker.
Nice voice? We thought so, Mr. Rosen. So did a lot of folks when Buddy Hall won the Arthur Godfrey Talent Scouts program about a year ago. Maybe that was when Buddy Hall was discovered. Maybe not. Buddy had a real nice voice. He hit some big-time shows in New York on guest shots. He got a lot of attention after the Godfrey show. Why, Buddy Hall even had humility. Only thing he didn't have was a big show of his own. A commercial of the kind that hits the nets and pays the bills.
And that's where WSM came in. With our avowed intention of making our programming even better than it was in 1951, we went to work to find exactly the right piece of talent to replace Snooky. Our program director auditioned singers all over the country. Right there in New York, he heard 37 young hopefuls. And out of the bunch, Buddy Hall, 23 years old, a powerhouse of personality, a young professional who is going places. On Sunday Down South, Buddy Hall goes places with some fine company, too. Half-hour show packs a cast of 60. a full staff band under Owen Bradley. The Decca Stars, the Anita Kerr Singers, Dolores Watson, the Works. Add more company. Sunday Down South guest stars like Rosemary Clooney, the Ames Brothers, Margaret Whiting, Don Cornell, the Hilltoppers. Big names in a big business.
And is the Sunday Down South network holding together? Is the sponsor happy?
The sponsor is happy, as attested to by his recent renewal for the 9th consecutive year. The network, 20% larger than it was in 1951 at the height of Snooky's WSM career.
With that mention of the sponsor, we kind of slipped in the back door to commercial radio. And that's something we didn't mean to do at all. Because at WSM, commercial radio is something of which we're somewhat proud. Perhaps in a presentation of this type, it's normal to skip lightly over the fact that the radio station is in business to serve advertisers as well as listeners. If so, we would depart from the norm to the extent of turning a very large spotlight on our commercial operation.
This is the way we see it. The American system of radio is built on the idea of commercial radio. And as a corollary of this thought, it was the prospect of loss of commercials that prompted a lot of folks to say that we would cut back on the entire big WSM operation.
But we gambled. Instead of pulling back, we expanded. Our bet went down on the proposition that we would hold all our talent, add to it. We would continue all our public service, add to it. We would continue to produce new shows more than ever before. With this background, we think it's interesting to report that the gamble paid off handsomely from the commercial side. Not only is our talent and production payroll the biggest in history, commercial radio has never been so strong as it is today at WSM. Now hear this, Mr. Rosen, the sound of a wonderful musical instrument. Yes, Mr. Rosen, at WSM, that is the sound of a musical instrument because, let's face it, music is a big business in Nashville, and WSM has made it so. In the 20s, it was New York pouring out Broadway tunes. In the 30s, it was Hollywood grinding out cinema musicals. In the 40s, it was neck and neck between New York and Hollywood as the twin music capitals of America. Then, suddenly, the big new factor in the music business became a small Tennessee town called Nashville. And the reason back of the shift of musical gravity? WSM's unequaled talent pool. Oh, you needn't take our word for it. Let's check the record. We'll spare you the typical Tin Pan Alley exaggeration and refer you instead to a few conservative, highly respected journals whose reputations for impaling stark facts are unquestioned. Nation's Business says,
What brought this music into great popularity nationally and internationally was station WSM. Its country music glamour boys are as big, sometimes bigger in record sales and jukebox popularity as Bing Crosby or Frank Sinatra.
Collier's magazine says,
Nashville is the focal point. For years, this form of show business flourished apart from the Hollywood-New York axis. But recently, the balance has been suddenly and violently disrupted. The Nashville Muse has won the entire nation. If the rest of the radio industry is in the doldrums, WSM has more business than it can handle.
Pathfinder says,
Not all the gold in the South is in the vaults at Fort Knox. A sizable chunk of it is found in radio station WSM, Nashville, Tennessee, capital of folk music. The reason is Grand Ole Opry, owned outright by WSM, the showcase of American folk music. All the major record companies do a land office business in Nashville.
Coronet says,
Events occurring today in Nashville comprise a sociological phenomenon. Will it ever stop growing? The newly rich song publishers, record firms, and performers keep asking.
American Magazine says,
This year income prophesied to reach $35 million. The top country singers expected to gross at least $7,500,000 from records, personal appearances, radio, and sheet music sales. Give thanks to radio station WSM, a powerful clear channeler which blankets 30-odd states.
New York Times Magazine says,
There's a revolution brewing in the music business, and the center of this activity is Nashville, home of the fabulous radio program called Grand Ole Opry.
Farm and Ranch Magazine says,
It is a well-known fact that the balance of power in the present-day music industry has shifted from New York and Hollywood to Nashville, Tennessee.
Well, that's what the magazines in 1953 said when they wrote the WSM story. Now for a quick rundown on the kind of talent that made these flattering phrases possible. Let's go back to that sound of the biggest radio audience in the world at the Grand Ole Opry.
The Grand Ole Opry is the big top of folk music. When a hillbilly reaches the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, it's comparable to the thrill that a vaudeville entertainer might have had in the old days when he played the Palace stage. When a singer steps out in front of 5,000 people at the Ryman Auditorium, he knows that at last he is among the best. He has arrived.
There stands the glass, fill it up to the brim, till my troubles grow dim. It's my first one to take.
That was the night, and that lad had arrived. 2 months before, Webb Pierce was just another country singer looking for an audition at WSM. Then came his Grand Ole Opry debut. And, well, you heard for yourself. The audience loved him. This year, he's already sold over 3 million phonograph records. That boy's become a big drawing card on personal appearances almost overnight. And a man from the income tax department follows him around to make sure he stays in the very best of health.
The Grand Ole Opry has been the big top of folk music for a long time now. And some of the stars on this great show are just as popular as they were 10 years ago. For example,
You left me and you went away. You said that you'd be back in just a day. You've broken your promise and you've left me here alone. I don't know why you did, dear, but I do know that you're gone.
Yes, Mr. Rosen, Ernest Tubb, who was second only to Bing Crosby in Decca sales when Der Bingle was at his peak, and today continues to sell more than 2 million platters a year.
the newest and brightest stars in the folk music field, such as Webb Pierce. The really big names, such as Ernest Tubb, that continue to head the list year after year. They're on the Grand Ole Opry. Big stars, and so many of them. We'd like to play you just one hit by each of these stars in 1953, Mr. Rosen, but we'll spare you that.
And for very good reason. You see, we fixed time and found that it would take over 3 hours just to play one representative record from each of the 66 Grand Ole Opry acts which had hits waxed last year. Doesn't sound like much of a talent cutback at WSM, does it, Mr. Rosen? Now, even though time doesn't permit a sample of the music, let's give the man a quick rundown on our Grand Ole Opry record stars.
Well, let's see. There's Roy Acuff on the Capitol label.
There's the King record star, Cowboy Copus.
The Old Cole Tater Boy, Little Jimmy Dickens on Columbia Records.
The great comedy act Lonzo and Oscar with Cousin Jody on Decca Records.
The Grand Ole Opry's Canadian import, Hank Snow on RCA Victor Records.
The lad who can draw 5,000 people to a personal appearance in a town with a population of 3,000, Bill Monroe on the Decca label.
The Candy Kisses Kid, George Morgan, who records for Columbia.
Another Columbia recording star, a favorite with network radio audiences coast to coast, Carl Smith.
Johnny and Jack, the Tennessee Mountain Boys on RCA Victor.
Kitty Wells on the Decca label.
Moon Mulligan of King Records.
Martha Carson on Capitol Records.
Ken Marvin, RCA Victor.
Grandpa Jones, RCA Victor.
Marty Robbins, Columbia Records.
Chet Atkins, RCA Victor.
Jerry Bird, Mercury Records.
Rusty Gabbard, MGM Records.
Tommy Warren, Columbia Records.
Tommy Jackson, Dot Records.
Eddie Hill, RCA Victor Records.
Grady Martin, Decca Records.
Del Wood, Republic Records.
Johnny Maddox, Dot Records.
Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, Columbia Records.
Farron Young, Capitol Records.
Red Foley, Decca Records.
Hank Garland, Dot Records.
Beasley Sisters, Coral Records.
Bobby Wright, Decca Records.
Helen Carter, OK Records.
The Carlisles, Mercury Records.
Jimmy Rogers Snow, RCA Victor.
Justin Tubb, Decca Records.
Tabby West, Coral Records.
Billy Wallace, Decca Records.
Kathy Copas, King Records.
Bill Dudley, Capitol Records.
Melissa Monroe, Columbia Records.
Audrey Williams, Decca Records.
Autry Inman, Decca Records.
George McCormick, MGM Records.
Don Helms, MGM Records.
Tommy Soulsby, Coral Records.
June Carter, Columbia Records.
Jack and Daniel, Decca Records.
The Amber Sisters, Capitol Records.
Skeeter Tubb, Decca Records.
Salty and Matty Holmes, MGM Records.
Shot Jackson, Specialty Records.
Goldie Hill, Decca Records.
Okay, Ernie, that's enough. That gives us a pretty fair sample of Grand Ole Opry recording talent. In addition, we've got those wonderful country comedy acts. Names known the world over. Names like Minnie Pearl, the Duke of Paducah, and Rod Brasfield. We won't go into a lot of additional detail about the artists themselves. You probably know as much about them as we do. We will add this footnote, however. The Grand Ole Opry today is the biggest thing in the folk music field, even as it was in 1951.
Footnote to a footnote. In 1952 and 53, WSM added another trophy to its folk music showcase, the Fame Award, as the best country music show on the air. Who did the picking? Newspaper and magazine radio columnists throughout the country, making their selections for the Motion Picture Daily Poll.
Grand Ole Opry stars here in Nashville last year drew 285,000 people to the Ryman Auditorium to see our Saturday night show. Opry stars on the road played a total of 2,895 performances in every state from coast to coast and in every province in Canada. To see these stars, over 1 million people paid a sizable roll of money, and in so doing, proved the contention of numerous magazine stories that show business elsewhere may be singing the blues, but the Grand Ole Opry continues to prosper, both at home and on the road.
As you can see, Mr. Rosen, we love the Grand Ole Opry. We think the Opry music is the people's music. The funny songs, the shouting songs, the sad songs. 2.5 years ago, in 1951, a lot of folks said radio was a tired old man. We didn't think so then. We don't think so now. We thought radio was still a kid. A crazy, mixed-up kid, perhaps, but one who was still growing. We hope that we've done our part to help continue this growth. Like we said, our story began on June 27th, 1951, when we put an ad in Variety. In so doing, we set the WSM compass for the next several years. Have we held the course we deliberately chose through somewhat stormy waters? That's for you to say. Naturally, we hope you say yes. Thanks for listening, Mr. Rosen.
The WSM Variety Award presentation was written by Bill Graham. Your announcers were
Ernie Keller.
and David Cobb.
Engineers were Elmer Alley, Charles Bragg, Glenn Snoddy, and Tom Sparkman.
And production was by Noel Digby.